Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Our lesson today will come from Matthew chapter 16 and verse 26. A familiar verse, I'm sure, to most of us. But as we kick it off, the great philosopher Socrates is quoted by his equally great disciple Plato as saying, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Now that's from a philosophical position. That is not necessarily from someone who is looking at it from a theological position, though a lot of things that the philosophers talked about in the ancient Greek philosophical sense, they were trying to make sense of the world and delved into theological things. So philosophy and the Bible are often found in opposition, but in this area, they're completely in unity. Consider the thought behind Jesus' words in Matthew chapter 16, verse 26. "For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul?" So in these two questions, Jesus calls on each person to examine his or her reason for existence and what this existence means to their eternal existence. So philosophically and theologically, boy, they come together, don't they? They are joined together in what Jesus says, and Socrates, Socrates probably would have gotten along with Jesus in thinking about things and wondering, and probably Socrates would have sat with Jesus and just wondered, where does he come up with even the questions to ask about things like this? So first thing we have to do is define some of the terms that Jesus uses. All right? Not define them like we sometimes would use them. Define them like Jesus would use them. So what is the soul? What is the soul? What is Jesus talking about when he's talking about a soul and a man forfeiting his soul? Well, it's the higher life. Now, I don't mean the beer commercials on TV. No. I'm talking about in reality, looking at life and existence. So what are we talking about? The soul, the higher life, that part of man which distinguishes him from the beast. Animals, I don't care what people say, animals do not have a soul. They do not have a spirit. Somebody, I forget, a movie or something, I forget where I even saw it now. Oh, that dog just had a wonderful soul. I'm sorry. Dogs are wonderful animals. Cats can be wonderful animals. Hard to understand, but when you get that, no, they don't, because human beings are created in the image of their Creator, and animals are not. Animals act by instinct. But another distinguishing mark is that the soul is that which will survive the ordeal of death. And I say it survives the ordeal of death, initially survives the ordeal of death, but the resurrection is going to even take care of that physically. With the resurrection, death is something that wasn't supposed to happen to man in the first place. God had put man in the Garden of Eden with the tree of life. It says, as long as you eat of the tree of life, you're not going to die. What's death? You don't have to worry about it as long as you have the right to the tree of life. Well, of course, once they sinned and partook of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they found out what death was. It's separation from God, which leads to a separation of body and spirit, or that soul, which God breathed into the nostrils of that first man. He became a living being, a living soul. So questions that we might ask is, shall we say that a man has a soul? Do you have a soul? Now don't answer that, because there are a couple of questions that follow up. So, does a man, and when I say man, I'm talking about woman also, have a soul, or that a man is a soul? Notice what the Bible says. The Lord breathed into his nostrils a breath of life, and man became a living soul. Not that he was given a soul, he became a living being, a soul. So if you simply have a soul, you know what you can do? You can separate soul from self. I got myself, and myself has a soul. Or is it the case that yourself is your soul? Your consciousness, your awareness, everything about you is your soul. And that's what you're going to carry with you even after physical death. And if you leave this world separated from God, you carry an eternity in spiritual, eternal death. So those are questions we would ask. What's its value? Well, let's take it to Antiques Roadshow and find out what the value is. You know, I don't think they know. But isn't it a wonderful thing? You know, you take that little teapot or whatever that great grandma left to you, and you take it to, oh, is this thing worth anything? Yes, it's worth something. Okay, what's it worth? Is it worth $1 million, or is it worth $1? You know, tell me, what's it worth? Well, we want to know what the value of the soul is. But you have to have an expert tell you that, right? Right? You don't want to go out on the street and take a poll and say, well, what's the value of a soul? Get 100 people to tell you what the value of a soul is. How many people are going to tell you the correct answer? So we want to go to an expert. But we want to go to an expert who's not only going to tell you what the value of a soul is, but is going to show you what the value of your soul is. Understand me there? Understand? If you got an old car and you tell someone, what's the value of this old car? It's worth $50. Give me $50, I'll take it to the junkyard for you. You know, that's how much it's worth. But in essence, it might be worth $50,000 if it's just fixed up a little bit. You know, so somebody might. So Jesus, what is the value of my soul? You're telling me that you know I need to be careful with it. You know, what's the value of it? Matthew chapter 5, verse 29 through 30. If your right eye causes you to sin, how valuable is your eye? You really don't know till you lose it, right? How valuable? If it causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better for you to lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. It's just a body, right? It's just a body. Oh, wait a minute, what's connected to that body? Your soul. Your soul. Okay? Verse 30. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away, for it is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go into hell. So how much value is your soul? It's of more value than any part of your body. But go another step. Matthew chapter 10, verse 28. And do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. And notice one word, kill, in the first part of that phrase. Kill. But notice in the second part, rather fear him who can destroy. Not kill, but destroy. Destroyed there is not destroyed in the sense of annihilate. That word is like the destruction that happened to Jesus' body on the cross. It was broken, right? His body was broken. It didn't work anymore. That's why it was dead, right? But the Spirit left it, right? Oh, at the resurrection, when the Spirit comes back to the body and the body's resurrected, it's not going to be broken anymore, okay? And it can't be really destroyed in the sense that we often think about destroyed, but it can be in a state of being destroyed or destructed for what? Eternity. So we find here that the soul is more valuable than our entire body. So you got the parts of the body, it's more, but it's more valuable than the whole body. But don't stop there. You know, it's more valuable than the whole world. And that's what Jesus is talking about here. Okay? What if you would gain the whole world and forfeit your own soul? There's no value in that. You've given up that which is of value. So Jesus said that my soul is so valuable that he was willing to die for me, for my soul, and willing to die for your soul. That's how valuable it is. And we can't put terms on that really until we would maybe be in a circumstance where somebody actually dies for us. No, we talk about soldiers, right? You know, oh, soldiers and Jesus are the only ones who have died for us. But unless you know someone specifically who has actually stood in front of you and taken a bullet or done something to actually, it really doesn't strike home, does it? Does it? It's just a platitude until actually somebody does it. And you know what? Jesus actually did it. So we can go to him and we can ask him about the value of our soul and get the right answer. Like Antiques Roadshow, right? We'll go to the expert, someone who really knows. Because what makes our soul so valuable? It's the possibilities, right? The possibilities of the soul, right? What can it do? It can sin or it can be righteous. The soul that sins, it shall what? Die. Can our soul sin? Yeah. Why? Because we sin, and when God looks at us, when Jesus looks at us, he looks at us as a soul, something very valuable. And if we choose to sin, see, we've chosen to be in rebellion to God. But we can choose to be righteous, so we can be a righteous soul. And how many times do we see in the scriptures? There's a passage in the book of Revelation, right? The righteous souls beneath the altar in heaven, or things of that nature. Righteous souls. Our souls can be miserable, or our souls can be happy. Now, understand, that's going to be on God's terms, right? Because what does the world say? Utilitarianism. Whatever makes more people happy than unhappy is good. That's what utilitarian. So if it makes 40 million Germans happy to kill 4 million Jews, then that's morally acceptable. No, that's why I see at the Nuremberg trials they said there is a higher law that transcends time and space.
Amen.
Yeah, that isn't right. So it's not all about happiness, right? See? And there are some times when we, as the children of God, find ourselves in a miserable place. But, you know, then we turn around and say, yeah, we live in a fallen world, and there are terrible things happening around us, but it could be worse. We could not be a child of God. We would have no hope. So we can be miserable, and we can choose to live in the misery, or we can stand up and we can live the blessed life, the abundant life that Jesus said that he has come that we might have. And we can have an abundant life in spite of all the terrible stuff going on around us. So miserable people are never satisfied, but they find a perverse happiness in making everyone around them miserable. I call them liberals. But what can you say? You can't say that on, well, social media. We'll see if I get a strike on YouTube. Okay. Yeah. What else about the soul? It can descend into the horrors of hell, or it can ascend to the bliss of heaven. It can. So that's the possibilities of the soul. That's what makes it so valuable. Because when it comes right down to it, those possibilities are the things that make us godlike or not. You see what I'm saying? Most of that's free choice stuff. And that's what God is. Can God sin? No, God can't. Right? Well, it's because God, by nature, never sins. But we, by nature, could sin, but we've got to choose to be like God. Okay? And that's very tough for us. That's why we need a Savior. So it's a wonderful thing, but that's what makes us like God and separates us from the animals or the beasts, what have you. So Jesus is not dealing with just the soul in this passage. He's making a comparison between the soul and the world. So what is the world? In 1 John chapter 2 and verse 16, John, the apostle, writes about all that is in the world. To explain what he's talking about here, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and the pride of life, So he could have put it in parentheses. I don't think he put it in parentheses. That's our way of communicating, isn't it? Dashes and parentheses, but dashed in there or parentheses in there is saying this is what he's talking about, right? This is what he's talking about. He's saying these things the world is not from the Father, but is from the world. The desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and the pride of life is not from the Father, but is of the world. It's of this fallen world. Okay? God didn't even create it. He created the possibility of it, hoping that man would choose to do what was right. But once sin entered, boom, all of it's there. So the world includes all the pleasures, all the wealth, and all the honor that the world can give. That the world can give. That the world offers. If you do what? If you obey the world. And who's the ruler of this world? Satan. How do we know that? Oh, that's what Jesus said. That's what Jesus said. Satan is the ruler of this world. Now, who's the true ruler? Well, Christ is, but you got those who are in opposition. You got those who are in rebellion. So this world of the apostles is a philosophy of life securely set in this fallen world. And it's all around us, right? We pick up the newspaper, it's there. We get up in the morning, we go to work, it's there. We turn on the TV, it's there. We converse with our neighbors, what? It's there. We talk to our children and our grandchildren, you know what? We find it there. We find it everywhere in this world because that philosophy is securely set in this world, this fallen world. So Jesus' question, if you should gain the whole world, what would be your gain? What would you get if you gained the whole world? Well, some of the things that you would gain are, number one, something that cannot satisfy. Wait a minute. If I had all the world, I wouldn't be satisfied? No, you wouldn't be satisfied. John chapter 4, verse 13, Jesus said to her, everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. Now, what water was he talking about? He was talking about that water in that well. Remember, he said, give me a drink. Okay? And she says, how are you, why is it that you, a Jew, are asking me, a Samaritan, to give you a drink? He said, if you knew who I was, you'd ask me for living water. That if you drank it, you'd never get thirsty again. And he says, this water, everyone who drinks this water that you're giving me, you're going to get thirsty again. So even if you gained the whole world, you know what you would want? You'd want another world to go with it, because one wouldn't be enough, right? That's the way this fallen world operates. You just never get enough in this fallen world. We get hungry one day, you know what? We're going to get hungry the next day. But that happens, right? That happens. But when we're talking about our soul, what is it that feeds our soul? What is it that brings our soul to a satisfaction that we don't have to strive and we don't have to worry about things? And it's the living water that Jesus gives. It's the living bread that Jesus gives us, which is a philosophy, so to speak, of life that says there's a better hope beyond this fallen world. You don't have to worry about gaining the whole world because you know what? Well, we'll get to that in a moment. Something else that you would gain, you'd gain a dangerous master. Luke chapter 18, verse 18 through 25. We won't read that, but that's a story about the rich young ruler. Remember, he comes to Jesus, good master, what must I do to inherit eternal life? You know what the scriptures say, you know. I've done all of that. I've done all of that. Well, here's what you need to do then. Sell all that you have and give the money to the poor. What? What? Well, what we find out is that the rich young ruler was a slave to his riches. A slave to his riches. So he had a dangerous master. And if we would gain the world, well, who's going to take care of the world then? It'd be our responsibility, right? You buy a car, whose responsibility is it to take care of that car? Yours. You buy a house, whose responsibility is it to take care of that house? Yours. Yeah, that's an awful lot of responsibility. You gain the world, whose responsibility is it? Yours. So, you see how that works? He had a danger. He became a slave to his riches. You gain something that's perishable, and that's what I was mentioning earlier. 1 John chapter 2, verse 17. The world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of God abides forever. You gain the world, what might happen 2 o'clock this afternoon. Jesus could come back, and then what do you got? Now, like the rich man with barns, right? Tonight your soul will be
Required.
what?
Required.
Of you. Now who's this all going to be? Yeah, let the kids fight over it. And something you have to leave. You must leave. 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 7, for we brought nothing into this world, and we cannot take anything out of it. Yeah, what? Job? Naked I came into this world, naked I will depart. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Brought nothing in, can take nothing out. But boy, I'm going to worry about it while I'm here. Yeah.
That next verse is, if we have food and covering with these, we shall be content.
Be content. Yeah.
Just a little bit, be content.
And it's that striving, just like with that rich young ruler. Don't let that don't become a slave to those things. Nothing wrong with preparing, nothing wrong with being ready, but like the rich man with barns, what? He had plenty, but then when he was blessed and could be able to share, he chose not to. See? He chose not to. So, yeah, it's again that philosophy. If you should gain the whole world, what would be your loss? Put it in the scales. Put it in the scales. For everything you gain, you must sustain a loss. There's a country song a few years ago, about that. And, you know, it makes some sense. You know, if you want some worldly acclaim, think about what you have to give up. So sensual pleasure is gained at the price of purity, right? 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 18. For, speaking loud boasts of folly, they entice by sensual passions of the flesh those who are barely escaping those who live in error. Yeah. There are people who live in error. There are people who are trying to get out of it. And you know, as soon as we take a step to get away from the fallen world stuff, you know what Satan's going to do? He's going to send some of his minions to get them back. Get them back! And they use that sensual pleasure to grab and pull back. Wealth is gained at the price of honesty, liberality, and sympathy. If wealth is the chief motivator, lie. Lie to get it. Don't give anything away, and have no sympathy on a lot of that. Amos, right? The things that we're looking at in the book of Amos is there. And you think about Luke chapter 16, verse 19 through 21, that's the Lazarus and the rich man, right? So those things kind of fall into harmony there. Fame is gained at the price of conviction. Luke chapter 6, verse 26, woe to you when all people speak well of you, for so their fathers did to the false prophets. The fathers spoke well of the false prophets. You go back and look at what some of the things we're talking about in the minor prophets, and we'll hit a good bit, but in particular you get to the major prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel. Look how they were treated. And the false prophets, they got the acclaim. So when purity, honesty, liberality, sympathy, and conviction are gone, the soul is gone. The soul is gone. Now, I don't mean there isn't a soul anymore. I'm saying the soul and its value is gone. Remember Esau, what did he do? He sold his birthright for a bowl of stew, or pottage, it says in the King James Version. So the soul, the higher life, must be surrendered when we make a conquest of the world. And it doesn't have to be the whole world. Sometimes it's just a part of the world. So if you should gain the whole world, what would be your profit? Hey, bottom line, right? Bottom line, CNBC, Fox Business News, you name them, write down. Let's get to the bottom line here. What's the profit? So what would a fish be profited if it should gain all the seas at the forfeit of its gills or its fins? What would its profit be? None. What good would it do it? Or a bird, if it should gain all the atmosphere at the forfeit of its wings? What makes it a bird? Basically, its wings. What would a man be profited if he should gain the whole world and forfeit his eyes? What if you gain all the great artworks of the world at the price of your eyes? You couldn't see them. And you didn't dare touch them. What happens if you touch them? You ruin them. Or his ears, or his health, or his soul. His soul. That which is worth more than any part of his body or the entire body. What would he profit? Jesus had some good questions, doesn't he? Makes us think. So the Master's first question contemplates man in the present state of existence. His second finds man on the barren shore of eternity, having bartered his soul for the trophies of worldliness. What shall man give in exchange for his soul? What would you give? What could you give if you got nothing? Because you've given up the only thing that you've got, and that's your soul. Because you came into this world with nothing, you leave with nothing, you just got that soul. And you've given it for nothing. To regain this priceless possession is out of the question, for he stands there empty-handed. The one who forfeits his soul for the world must, in the end, lose both the price and the purchase. That's what Jesus is trying to get across. Wonderful lessons from the Lord. That's why he's the master theologian, master philosopher. He knows questions that, he knows the answers that we don't even know the questions about. All right, so the lesson is yours. If you have a need, please let your request be made known as we stand and sing the invitation.